in the keys, the fingertips that reach out to touch them, the string that begs to be bent? Or is it in the notes on a page, a foot to a pedal, the infinite space between imagination and skill? Or is it simply music?
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 13th Note podcast, Art of Mastery. And today I bring you someone that's very special. I've known for decades. This gentleman has the knowledge of incredible history of guitar, as well as the anatomy, construction, and just all the little things that most of us don't know. This gentleman would know because he's known as Dan the Guitar Man. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dan Kiblinger. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great this morning, Jeff.
Hey, man, thank you for coming on to the 13th Note Art of Mastery. Usually what we do is we want to kind of get the know-how and understand how you got into especially the passion about the guitar. So let's talk a little bit about when you were growing up. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up in Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Yeah. And how, give us an idea, when were your first interests that started on the guitar?
I started in the mid 1960s. There was a show on the TV called Where the Action Is, and the resident band, the house band, was Paul Revere and the Raiders. And every afternoon I'd race home from school to watch that show, and they're always playing. There's always pretty girls around them, and they just look like they're having so much fun. And I told myself, I want to do that.
Interesting. And how old were you?
I was about 12.
Okay. And do you remember your first guitar?
Yes, I had a little Japanese guitar that was bought at Myers Music on First Avenue in Seattle. Consequently, that's the same music store that Jimi Hendrix got his first guitar.
No kidding.
Yeah, and it cost $29.
How cool
for an electric guitar, and I think it was about $15 for the amplifier.
Right. You know, it's interesting that I got into guitar, and I talked about it in a previous podcast because of girls too. And it's funny, isn't it, that we both kind of went that direction, yet somewhere along the line, that instrument dominated and took over.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, what were you like as a kid, especially, right before you go into kindergarten? Do you remember how you were? Were you a playful kid, happy kid, sporty kid? What kind of kid were you?
Well, I'm old enough that I didn't go to kindergarten. They didn't have it yet.
Yeah.
I was pretty happy-go-lucky little kid. Yeah, I had red hair and freckles, and hot tempered, but really funny.
Yeah. Oh, good. Did you get in fights?
I doubled as a punching bag several times.
Okay. So, what were your interests as you were now start to get into, I'm here, I'm 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. What were you into at that time?
Cars. I mean, I've been a gearhead since I could walk, and
right.
I can tell you cars I saw when I was 5 years old and describe what color they were, what model they were, and what year they were.
Right. And how? And is that how you got into the mechanics and rebuilding and all that? The interest started to feed from that point.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right. And technically, you're pretty savvy because you're able to take a car apart and put it back together.
And we build them from the ground up at my house.
Yeah. Do you remember how old were you when you first dabbled in that?
Well, I first started doing that when I was about 9 or 10.
Really?
Swiping my dad's tools and taking apart junk cars.
Right. So, at what point do you remember taking apart a guitar?
Growing up, we were extremely poor. And I only got the one new guitar when I was 12. And that was my first electric guitar. And after that, I went through a long period of, being very poor. And so if I wanted a different guitar, I had to find one that someone had discarded or traded to me for almost nothing. And generally they needed stuff done to them. I didn't have any knowledge how to do it, but I had that brain that, I'm a problem solver. So I would sit there and think about it until I figured it out. Sometimes they were very rudimentary repairs, but eventually I would get them figured out.
Wow. And you're in your teens?
Yeah, my teens and early 20s, I really started getting involved in it, a lot more. And
so previous to that, when you got your guitar around 12, 13, did you learn about tuning and chords or those type of things? Did you take lessons?
Well, we were so poor, there were no lessons to be had for me. So basically, if I saw you playing a guitar on the street, you were going to have me right in your face for the next 30 minutes going, do that again. Show me that.
Yeah.
So, and people gave me lessons against their will.
But you know what? That kind of set the precedent in regards to having the music store and everybody sitting around the music store and talking shop and guitar, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the fine part that I think we both really embraced and loved, is that camaraderie, going to the place where everybody knows your name without having alcohol.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you understand the concept of tuning when you got the guitar, or?
No, that was a struggle. That was a struggle for me. Well, every time I saw somebody playing a guitar, I'd run, grab my guitar. Would you tune this for me?
Okay. And did you know, like, from listening to the pop music or the music that you were growing up with, that you were able to emulate it off of radio, or how did you go about kind of playing the guitar?
I had a good ear. I was born with an ear. And the first thing I learned on an electric guitar, a song by the Paul Revere and the Raiders called Kicks. And, if I played that hook, everybody, they didn't even know who that is, but they would remember that hook.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I learned. And so after that, everything that I began to learn was hooks of songs, because that was the part that was embedded in your mind, So I could play all these intros and stuff, but I couldn't play chords yet. Chords didn't come along till later for me.
Yeah. And at this point, you're still playing with the guitar you originally started, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you at that point start looking at other people's guitar and go, hey, that's different, or hey, this is different? What was your thoughts? You remember looking at other guitar players, try to get them to show you stuff and seeing their instrument?
I realized I had a very inexpensive guitar, but I was happy to have it. But I saw other guitars, like in the mid 1960s, Vox guitars were all the rage. Brian Jones of the Stones, a little bit later, Tom Petty, Paul Revere and the Raiders played Vox guitars, and they were really cool looking. They had one that was like 6-sided. I can't remember what they called it now. Maybe it was a Phantom. I can't remember, but I thought that was the coolest looking guitar ever. So I began to notice these different styles. And when I saw my first Stratocaster and realized what it was, I thought, wow, that is one sexy guitar.
So your love affair with Fender guitars started at that point, would you say?
Yeah, and it wasn't just Fender guitars. I mean, Les Pauls, I love those too, and then I liked looking at the big hollow body jazz guitars. At that point, I had never owned one and couldn't afford one anyways, but I really thought they were cool looking,
Right. Do you remember the first time you played a Les Paul guitar?
Oh gosh, I was probably in my later 20s before I got to actually handle one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because those are the so-called the moments, right? The mile markers, if you will, of your journey. And for me, I remember the first Les Paul I played. The first Les Paul I played, I actually owned it. That's that 72 that I have.
The black one or the Sunburst one?
Remember that Sunburst with the Kaler on it?
Yeah.
That was my very first one. And the irony behind that is I had no idea what that guitar was valued or worth or what it meant being a 72 with embossed pickup covers and witch hats and none of those. As a kid, you don't know these things.
No,
but now I look back.
Guitar.
Yeah, it's well, if I knew that what I know now, then I would have never cosmetically altered anything. I would have left this, mint the way it was. But unlike, that's just not realistic in the era of the 80s because of Edward Van Halen. And you remember everybody was coming in carving up stuff because there wasn't super strats at that point.
I tell people all the time, I made a bunch of money in the 80s putting locking tremolos on guitars, and I made a bunch of money in the early 2000s taking those off and restoring the guitar back like it was.
Yeah. And let's start going down that road a little bit. You have a mechanical aptitude and you got to, definitely you're a hands-on guy. There's no question. I met you when I was still in high school and you were working in a music store in the mall, right? At that time, you were already getting into the MI business. Was that your first top shelf level retail in MI, or did you have experience prior to that?
No, that was it. That was where it began, right there at H&H Music in the mall.
Yeah. And was it hard to get that gig not having previous any kind of MI experience or retail?
No, I've kind of always had the gift for gab. Right. And there was a tall young lady that was the manager there, and she was real cute. And so I went in to ask for a job because, I thought it would be fun. And so I flirted with her. And then when we got done with the interview, I said, so there is a position available, right? And she said, yeah. And I go, well, do you take bribes? And she started laughing. She called me the next day and said, you got the job.
Oh, that's great. That's actually a great close. Yeah. And how long did you work at that position?
I worked there for about 1.5 years, or 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And then I opened my, go ahead.
Right. And this is where you went down to 34th Street or 43rd Street?
43rd Street, yeah.
43rd, yeah.
The Guitar Man was the name of that shop.
Right. I remember that shop. It was a quaint, very cool little place right off the main 290.
Yeah, it was one block off of 290 on the side street. There.
Very accessible. So how did just getting your first job at MI, general, and for the audience out there not understanding MI's music instrument, B&O is band and orchestra, of course, piano, keyboard. We kind of talk like that when we're in the industry because there are different departments. So general music stores like H&H, which offer band and orchestra as well as piano stuff, as well as guitars and all the accessories and so forth. We just call it a general MI store. And from you being new at that and then getting that under your wings, working there for 1 year or so, how did that inspire you to go, hey, let me go open my own guitar store?
Well, funny enough, I had a son in 1983, and unfortunately his mother became an alcoholic and didn't really want anything to do with him. So he was under my care all the time. So I had to figure out something to do where I could have him with me all the time, because I wasn't one of those guys that was going to put him in preschool and daycare. And I loved guitars. I would eat up with them at that point. I mean, I would talk to anybody that wanted to talk about guitars and whatnot. And I enjoyed it. I was starting to get good at talking to people, and I thought, I can do this. I had no idea at the time how hard it was to just open up a music store with very little money and even less experience. Yeah. But, I needed to succeed, because I had a child to take care of.
That's interesting that the motivation came from family. And isn't that amazing that out of that desire in being with your son, that you ultimately create a career path that just, I would say, that changes the landscape of guitar here in the Houston and Southeast Texas area. So that was godsend in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that store at the 43rd Street, How long did you have that before you moved over to airline?
It was only about a year or so.
Okay.
And then I moved to airline drive.
Yeah. And what was the thought behind moving that? Was it expense? Was it location?
Looking back, I don't know why I did that. I really don't. I can't come up with a single answer that makes sense at this point. It worked out for me well, but it would have worked out just as well where I was.
Right. Well, I remember going to the first store, definitely, because at that point, remember, we did that show with Cherie and everybody else, and that's when you had that store. And then the first airline store, I remember that because I came and taught for you on I believe Saturdays.
Yeah.
And that store was quite what I'd really loved about it, I remember there was, pieces that you would bring in that I've never seen before. And I remember seeing a Les Paul that had, I think the Moog electronics in it. And it was a tobacco burst, and it had a TP tailpiece, and it was great. But I had no idea what that electronic is. And I distinctly remember an older gentleman came in, and in Texas back then, I mean, older gentleman was like typical cowboy, remember, with the hats and so forth. And he sat down and played the guitar, and he was looking for quality, and he knew quality, I think, better than I did at that time. And he started asking me questions about the switches and so forth, which I go, I have no idea, but play with it, because I had no idea that Gibson had a thing with Moog and was doing that with the artist series or any of that. Because how often were we getting those kind of information? It wasn't like we had internet. So unless you went to an authorized Gibson dealer and sat there and picked their brain every day with a catalog, you just weren't going to know stuff like that. Or advertisements in Guitar Player magazine. Back then, that was another way to introduce us to new gear and so forth. So how are you learning new stuff that was coming off the block that could be potentially, this could be a great item?
Well, up to that point, I had been trying to learn everything I could about new stuff. But about that point, I started getting more and more into vintage instruments. And so instead of having my focus on the future, I changed my focus to the past.
Yeah.
And if you remember, when I opened that store, it was mostly low-end stuff. But by the time I moved into the next bigger building, It was completely full of vintage stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
what was the fork on the road that kind of inspired that?
Just finally getting to the point where I recognized what they were. I'd read every book I could read, watched everything. And about that time, I started going to guitar shows, and just, the history of these instruments, I mean, we've been talking about Les Paul guitars.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that Les Paul was actually a player and, equal to Van Halen, 30 years before Van Halen hit the scene.
Right.
Just in a different style.
Yeah. I think Les and Edward are both cut from the same cloth in the universe.
Exactly.
Innovators. Yeah.
Virtuosos to the next level, both of them.
Yeah. Right.
So, once I heard the stories of these guys, and the guitars that they inspired, the Birdland, for Charlie Bird, Johnny Smith, Gibson, all these guitars, I mean, they started taking on a life of their own, kind of, and
right.
When I would see one that somebody wanted to trade in or sell to me, I'd go, you know what, rent's due, but I'm buying that guitar.
Yeah. And so you saw value already ahead on the curve before vintage really went nutso in the market.
Well, it wasn't the value as much as it was the instrument, and I can honestly say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never really cared about money. I like having cool stuff.
I gotcha. Yeah, and hence also you build vintage cars because of that's
exactly. I focus on the past rather than the future for the most part, and having. I used to really get a kick out of people walking in my store and going, wow. I haven't seen one of these in 20 years. I haven't seen one of those in 30 years. Right. And strike up a conversation. And although I knew a fair amount at that time, I tried to learn something from everybody that talked to me about guitars. And, sometimes it was a person who didn't know anything about anything, but they had that one guitar and they knew all about it. And
that's right. Yeah, I get that. Interesting. Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't have paid him any attention, but I just knew there was something there to learn.
Right. What was the first that you would consider the good vintage piece that you got? Do you remember that guitar?
Yeah, I went to a Dallas guitar show and bought, I think it was a 1963 Fender Stratocaster. It's my first pre-CBS Stratocaster.
Yep.
And I mean, I just thought I thought I had arrived at that point.
And do you remember the price you paid for the 63?
It wasn't much. It really wasn't. It was $500 or $600.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was a refinished guitar, but still it had all the right parts on it. Yeah. And it was, a vintage Stratocaster, and that was the first one I'd had in the shop,
Right.
A few years later, you could come in and I would have 9 or 10 of them in a row.
Wow. Right. So on that 63 you got, is that a clay dot on the neck?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so can you explain to the audience what I mean by clay dot?
Well, the position markers on the fretboard before, I want to say it was 1964, they went to the perloid, but before that, they were made out of this clay substance that it was literally real squishy, kind of like clay, and they would push it in there and it would dry. And those were known as clay dot guitars because that's literally what they were.
Right.
And I think it was in 64, they started doing the perloid dots, and they were plastic, and then, they would drill the hole and just put a drop of glue and push them in, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was faster than doing the clay dots because the clay dots were done by hand.
Right. And they had to dry.
Yeah,
on top of that.
Here for several days.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've also noticed, like Rickenbacker, they did, that inlay that was filled like glue. And they had to let that dry before they had to work on it. And I mean, that's a multi-step opposed to just laying a piece of plastic in there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't recognize that's the difference between the collectability and also the quality of the uniqueness of that particular model in that particular year. And let me ask you your expert opinion. Does it have any kind of playability difference between clay dots and perloy? No, it doesn't, of course.
All aesthetics.
It's all. And do you pre-CBS? It seems to be the most desired because after CBS bought Fender, typical guitar audience starts saying, "Well, the quality suffered." Is that, in your opinion, pre-CBS versus CBS taking over? What's the biggest difference in those Fender guitars?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, 1965 is when that occurred.
Yeah.
1965, the guitars stayed very similar to the 64s, but there were subtle differences later in the year. Like all of a sudden, the headstocks were fatter, and some other things, but 65s kind of get a pass. But when you go to 66, then Fender went to that giant, ugly headstock, and it was really thick, adding weight to the guitar. The rest of the guitar didn't change very much. They still use the same bridge, they went to, instead of black bottom pickups, they went to gray bottom pickups. And, some people say they can tell the difference by listening to them. I personally can't, but, it just doesn't mean just means I'm not that smart. So, but there were, still a lot of things were similar. The same finish process was maintained through the late 1960s.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What I was going to say is there any kind of the wood construction, the body lamination, or anything of that sort pre-CBS to CBS that changed the quality for, basically manufacturing costs. Because I'm sure a lot of folks are not aware of that your plain tops, clear tops are used in much better piece of wood than, let's say, your solid spray, which could be 2 or 3 pieces of wood laminated together
or more,
and created a body.
Right.
So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, that's exactly right. After 65, starting in 66, you start noticing Stratocasters that have more pieces of wood in the bodies, instead of 1 or 2. There was a lot of guitars that had 1 or 2 pieces, and then all of a sudden there's 3 to 5, and that makes a big difference. And also, Leo Fender was very particular about the weight of the guitars, and so he would buy cuts of wood a lot of times based on the weight.
Interesting.
And that went out the window in 65.
Right.
And
what was his thought process with the weight? Was density heavier better or lighter better?
Well, the players, he was never a player, so he got all of his information from building guitars for players and guys that he trusted and knew, and they would give him positive or negative feedback on whatever modification he made, and he would base production on that. So he was a very, very smart man. Instead of just going with his ego, he had a lot of people that he depended on to guide him down that path.
Right. And I thought Leo was also brilliant, thinking that the parts are interchangeable, detachable necks, working like Mopar, in regards to if that start go bad, just swap it out.
Exactly. And, that's why we have so many guitars today that have, when you go to a guitar show and they have some pre-CBS Strats, nobody buys one without taking the pick guard off and looking underneath it and looking at the neck and the body, making sure all those parts came from the same guitar, because they do interchange and from year to year to year, for many years.
So would you say safe to say that until Leo Fender came out with the way he approached electric guitar manufacturing, what should I call modern guitar, that previous guitar and instrument makers were making traditionally very violin based, very piano based, meaning hands-on carvings and those type of things, because instruments were done in certain fashion, in certain designs, with the way of old school tooling. And Leo came with something different.
Yeah, he was the Henry Ford of guitars, basically. Okay. Henry Ford was the first guy to use an assembly line, a mechanized assembly line to build cars. And so was Leo Fender to build guitars. Everybody else was kind of doing it one-off, not exactly one-off, but more that way. And then when he came along with his bolt-on necks, nobody had done that before. And everybody's like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Well, it worked perfect.
He sure did. And the part on this that I love about the bolt-on neck is, it's different than set-in necks and glued-in necks and so forth. And is it better or worse? And a lot of your traditionalists would often say, of course, the craftsmanship is better when you're set necks and glued in. But at the same time, when you witness guys like, Jimi Hendrix, Edward Van Halen, these guys play with bolt-on necks pretty much their entire iconic career with their tunes. It didn't suffer. If anything, it had its own thing going on. So it is bolt-on versus glue set-in neck a big so-called difference? In your opinion, do you think they sound different, or other than, you can take them apart and fundamentally design is different?
Well, you have to break it down in 2 areas of bolt-on necks with Fender guitars. One was the original 4-bolt design, and then in 1973 was the first year, but in 72, at the end of 72, they went to the 3-bolt neck. Right. And those darn things, you could be playing it, and if you jerk the guitar with the strap on, the neck would shift.
Right.
And the guitar would be out of tune. And you'd literally, during a song, have to reach up and pound the headstock on the bass side and to get the neck back where it was. And a lot of times it would go back into tune without touching the tuning pegs.
Right.
But that didn't happen on a 4-bolt neck. It could happen if you really hit it hard, but who hits one that hard?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you fell on the ground with it, maybe.
Right. Exactly. You would have to be pretty brutal to knock one on a 4-bolt, I believe. You know, because when I played, you remember, I jumped around like a monkey.
You were a wild man.
Yeah, because I at an early age, I definitely recognized that people in your audience is listening with their eyes. You can go out there and stand still and play virtuosic for the entire hour, and everybody go, "Yeah, that's pretty good." But you can go out there and play mediocre, but jump around like an ape, and everybody tell you you're fantastic.
You were quite the showman in your youth, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Well, because I recognize that. I recognize people come see a show. People didn't, if they wanted to listen to music, they'll sit home and listen to their records.
That's right.
And music, I felt the same way.
Much visual.
Yeah, I grew up, the Kiss fan, the Van Halen fan, and both those guitar players were very visual stimulation, especially Edward, right? But this is the part that I really do believe guitar players and their uniqueness and the identity and personality flows through their instrument. So even though that we, romanticize pre-CBS Stratocasters, Jimi Hendrix played CBS Stratocasters and big headstocks and all this stuff that everybody kind of, looked at it from a collector point of view, like, yeah, but all of a sudden, 20, 40 years removed from Jimi Hendrix, and those CBS Strats are not being looked down at. Can you kind of give me your thoughts regards to what happened? Is it just time that changed our perception?
Repeat that last part again. I didn't catch it.
Think about it. Pre-CBS Strats for the longest time, let's say, especially late 70s, early 80s, became a huge talk about items. Collectors, like guys like Eric Johnson would talk about, my old 60 Strat, pre-CBS. And you get a lot of this in Guitar Player magazines at that time. I remember that as a kid reading it. But Hendrix was playing CBS Strats. And Hendrix, basically to me, besides Hank Marvin, put the Strat on that stratosphere, right? In the sense of, I got to go have one of those. No different than when somebody saw John Lennon with a Rickenbacker 325 and he went, I want to do that. Nobody in their right mind, to me, this is my opinion, that wants to play a short scale guitar. But if you're John Lennon and you got these chords and you want to play Beatles songs, well, what better, right? Play that guitar. So my point to you is, as we now move forward, Jimi Hendrix is now almost 60 years removed from when he came out to the scene. And at this point, the market for CBS Strats, I think, is just as good as pre-CBS Strats, or even the 70s 3-bolt microtilt Strats. Yeah. So give me your thoughts on that.
It was a generational thing. In my age group, by the time I got to where I could, get good guitars, I was pretty well grown up. I was in my early 20s, and so that was the guitars that were available at your local music store. Was those 3-bolt Strats. Everybody had one. It looked like Hendrix's guitar, and so everybody wanted one, and they were good guitars from 73 to 76. And then after 76, Fender threw all common sense out the window. And the guitars got thicker, the pickups got weenier. They weighed a ton. And so from 76 to 81, they were awful. They were heavy, they were expensive. In 81, a brand new Fender Stratocaster was $1,000.
Yeah.
A Gibson Les Paul was $900 for a custom.
Right.
Okay. A custom was 10 times the guitar of the Fender Strat in 1981.
Yeah, agreed.
They were just horrible.
Quality was different, right? But at the same time, I get where Fender was going, because my Stratocaster, my very first Fender Stratocaster, was brand new. and it was 1978 or 79, right? The microtil 3-bolt, tobacco burst, black pick guard. And the irony behind it is I had to live with that guitar and grow up with that guitar and figure out what it was, because that was the guitar that I ended up taking a router to and doing the Van Halen trick to it. But what was really surprising, number one, is I broke the whammy bar into the block. I had no idea you can actually do that.
Oh, that happened a lot.
Yeah, I figured that out now. After I did it, I was like, crap. Then I realized that the Fender construction changed, because I had the handbook, guitar handbook by Tom Wheeler, and it showed the block separating from the saddles and the plate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 78, 79, that whole thing was together.
Correct.
And it was blowing my mind. It's like, well, wait a minute. Now I can't take this apart and get my bar, stem out. So that immediately made me go and start looking at, well, what's on the market? And I found Schecter parts for Fender. And therefore start to create the better Stratocaster Partcaster idea. And I think Partcasters was actually start to be born around the late 70s with, number one, advents of Edward. Number two is just the necessity of replacing the crappy metal parts that Fender actually was sending out with their guitars. Now, you were saying that, a little thinner pickup. The thing in what I found out on the late 70s, early 80s Stratocaster is there's a definable sound that you can get from that guitar. It's not as fat, it's not as warm, but especially the out of phase neck to the middle pickup, there's an airy, hollow crispiness to that era that I find that the other eras didn't quite touch. What is your thoughts on that?
Oh, exactly the same thing. I mean, there was every period in Fender's history has something unique about it and something awful about it. And my two favorite positions on the selector switch on the Strat was the neck position by itself, and then the bell tone, the middle and the front pickup combined. I love those two tones a lot. That was my favorite too on the guitar. Right.
And it's funny that when we were doing the guitar experience with your store, I got that kind of gunmetal 90s Stratocaster. I don't even remember that one. That had a black pick guard, and it sounded almost identical to my very first Stratocaster. And I was so close. I mean, literally this close of keeping it just because the way it sounded. It didn't, it really just played fine. As well as unless you do something dramatically different on your Stratocaster, you can make almost every Stratocaster feel pretty close to a good playing guitar, right? Even though they're all different, they all have their personalities.
And they all have tremendous adjustability designed into it by Leo Fender,
Right. And with that, talk about guitars and their uniqueness. Let's just stay with Fender for the moment. That the guitar individually, we can do 10 in a row, same color, same, stuff on it, meaning tremolos, pickups, and so forth. But yet we can set it up to the guitar's potential. This is what I describe. I've never set up with measurement. I always set up with guitar's playability and potential. And all 10 will come out different.
They can, yeah.
Share with us a little bit about how did you start to learn about the guitar's uniqueness in personality in that level?
Well, as I progressed as a player, and when I first opened a guitar store, I really wasn't a player. I was a guy who monkeyed around with guitars all the time and wanted to play really bad and spent a lot of time at it, but I wasn't very good yet. But so like Leo, I had to learn from other people and guys like yourself, to come in and say, I got a buzz right here, and tell them, well, I don't know what's causing it, but let's see if we can figure it out,
Yeah.
And so I learned right away that, the Fender guitar was so much more adjustable than a Gibson. Gibson has some adjustment, you got the 2 pneumatic bridge and the string height,
Yeah.
But it's not as you can't change the neck angle like you can a Fender.
Right.
And but then again, almost all Les Pauls have a good neck angle. There are an exception to it here and there, but most of them have a really good neck angle.
Right.
But
That design itself is so important on that particular companies, especially Les Pauls, more so than I would say SGs, Firebirds, Explorers, or those lines. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's interesting that you didn't have a so-called a apprentice position with a guitar luthier or repair shop prior to doing this. You just went at it with your mechanical aptitude and also your know-how of being around and what you read. Am I correct? You just went at it.
Yeah. It was do or die for me.
Yep. That's incredible because, for my career, I end up moving into California and playing music and then working at shops and then ultimately building for Rickenbacker. And the two guys I learned from, Rick Becker at Bateman and you, I watched both of you guys approach repairs and talking about guitars on two different levels. He was a drummer as well. He's like Leo. He can't play guitar, but he knew how to fix stuff.
He was
amazing. Play guitar. Well, Rick was
Becker
different.
was amazing.
Yeah, he was the guy who said, "Hey, don't carve your guitar up." Being my 72 Les Paul, to put a Floyd on it. I don't care how much you love Edward. You don't do that. Let me show you this thing that I just saw in NAMM called Taylor. And he was the guy who got me to understand difference between fulcrum and the traditionals and those type of things, ideas of pivot points and so forth. You start showing me the points of like neck angles, about fret heights. That's where I actually learned from you. And I think a lot of it is because you were working on guitars that was on the lower end that constantly needed just a little touch here and a little touch there to put on the wall. Right. And those things I thought was really beneficial for me because, nothing worse than you grab a nice guitar like a Les Paul Custom and dang, on the 11th fret, there's a buzz on the B string. You're like, I can't take the neck off. I can't shim it. I can't do anything. What else am I going to do to it? Right. So you start to have troubleshoot the truss in the frets, and that's to me, you got to put your hours in. There is no shortcut in that. Right.
There really isn't.
Yeah. To really understand your guitar and how to solve its issues. And every one of them is different. Every one of them could be uniquely, let's say one guitar plays like a dog, but sounds great. We could never get this thing to play right. Sometimes some things are just overlooked, like the depth of the nut position, little things. And it takes someone who really understands the anatomy of the guitar. At what point did you start to get that confidence? It's just like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Oh yeah, I know what that is.
That's a good question. I think probably by the late 80s, I realized that I actually had more knowledge than I thought I did. And, and about that time I expanded doing a lot of things I didn't do before.
Yeah.
One of them was refinishing guitars. I used to get Rick Becker to spray guitars for me when I needed them painted. Yeah. And then talking to him, he's like, you could do it. You could do it.
Yeah.
And Neil Sargent, same thing. He refinished some guitars for me. And I think I had gotten a video from Dan Erlewine. And I watched the video, and then I thought, I can do this. So I set up a spray booth, and the first one I did was a Sunburst, and it turned out just fine. And after that, I went through a period where I was spraying Fender guitars for people from all over the world. I had a guy from New Zealand send me a Telecaster to paint.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the guy find you from New Zealand?
Ad in the Vintage Guitar magazine that I used to run,
Wow, how about that?
Finishing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Lots of guitars from Europe and, tons of guitars from the United States.
Right.
And that got to the point where it overwhelmed my whole business, and all I was doing was refinishing guitars. And I realized, that's not really what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to do one now and then because I enjoy it, but I don't want to become a production, full line guitar painting facility. Valley Arts Guitars contacted me about doing all their finishing. That's when I decided I'm gonna step away from that, because that's not what I want to do.
Right. Well, did you ever consider to expand a department, just hire painters?
No, I didn't. I'm not a very good teacher, and I just didn't want to do that. No, I didn't. It would just be one more thing to do. I wanted to have my hands on guitars every day, but for different reasons,
Right.
I still very passionate about the vintage guitar market, and still wanted to be out there beating the bushes, finding those old guitars. That's what's really important to me,
Right. Yeah, the hunt is definitely fun, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, so I know we could go on and on for Fender. I just want to jump ship a little bit,
Sure.
and let's go to talk about the Gibson guitars. Gibson guitars to me is day and night different than Fender. Like you said, Fender was like the Henry Ford's. If Henry Ford was the Fender, what would you consider Gibson to be?
Cadillac.
Okay. So represent America.
Yeah.
High quality.
They represented the best that America had to offer in guitars, in my opinion. There was more expensive guitars out there, but Gibson had such a wide variety of guitars, from solid bodies to hollow bodies, basses and whatnot, that they were very precise instruments. All of them not all of them, but 99% of them with set necks and really good neck angles. The fretwork was superb. I loved on the Gibson Les Pauls how they carved the neck binding around the frets, and it became part of the end of the fret, and they were so smooth feeling.
Yeah.
It was details like that. So Fender with the Model Ts, and Fords, and Gibsons were Cadillacs.
Right. And I think a lot of people out there, a lot of folks who don't know that Gibson, by the time the 70s rolled around, they were almost in the business for 100 years. It wasn't like they were a new thing by any stretch, making fretted instruments and string instruments.
They went back to the 19th century.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I believe there were Civil War guitars that actually Gibson made at that time, where Civil War soldiers had strung around a gut string Gibson out and fighting for their lives. And that, to me, is part of American history that it's really neglected in our instrument manufacturing side. It's the same thing with, and I know, and I learned about all this because I represented Steinway and Sons, and a lot of people are not familiar that Steinway and Sons is actually an American company, came out of New York City. And this company came out, in the 1800s, because at that point there was no radio, no entertainment, other than you have your instruments, you perform. Same thing with parlor guitars, parlor grands, right? And Gibsons, with their so many great things, mandolins and harp guitars, very creative, would you say, from that company's history of what they were manufacturing for the musicians. So by the time that when Les Paul showed up with the log, right? Get the kid back with the log, because supposedly Leo Fender rattled the cage so much that Gibson could not ignore anymore. But they didn't go down that road until much later, where I would say, the Sonics, and then there was a few other ones that had bolt-on necks. And I'm assuming they did that because of affordability and for the marketplace.
Yeah, that was back in the 70s and 80s, and they could offer a Gibson electric guitar with a hard shell case for like $369.
Yeah. A Marauder was one of those too.
Marauder was one, a Viper. There was a bunch of those, S1, S2, S3.
And I remember H&H actually carrying a Gibson. But H&H wasn't a Gibson dealer, were they? Yeah,
they were a Gibson dealer, but they only had if you were lucky working at H&H, you may have one Les Paul in stock. You'd have some of those. Sonic 180 was the hot thing then. They were right about $300 without a case.
Yeah.
And so for like $299, you can get a Gibson guitar made in America.
Right.
And so, that's what they stocked mostly. They liked the lower end Gibsons. They stocked a few Les Pauls, but they would typically go from store to store. They would be at one store for a while, and the manager would be like, I can't sell this. So they'd move it to another store and to another store.
Right.
Do
you remember how much the so-called MSRP was for, let's say, a Gibson SG during that period, like the late 70s? Because it wasn't very popular at that point.
No, they were, I want to say $600 or $700 for the average one, a 2 pickup model, no fancy bridge.
Right.
This is a standard SG.
Right.
I'm going to say they were $600 or $700, maybe a little bit more.
It's interesting is even up to the 2000s, you were able to still find deals like brand new SGs, Explorers for around $800.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you can't touch one for, under 17.
Yeah.
17 is probably the stop off price now on even, just plain Jane type of SGs in Explorers, Firebirds. When I say plain Jane, I mean no bindings, dots, 2 pups and your bridge, and that's it. So I think it's great that Gibson was thinking out of the box, and I know Fender was, because Fender had your student guitars, which considered Mustang is a student guitar. Would you say?
Yeah, Mustangs, and I'm sitting there looking at one right now, and I can't think of what the model is.
Some kind of horse, right? So was Leo copying horses, or was he copying cars?
Lead 2, Fender Lead 2s. Those were
that's right.
Yeah, those were. I'm sitting there looking at one, but that was bottom of the line guitar, Fender Bullet. That was a guitar that was way overpriced. In the early '80s, they were around $300 and some dollars. And no, I'm sorry, I'm lying to you. The Fender Bullet was $210, I think, and the pickguard was made out of metal, and it curved up to a 90-degree bend at the end, and that was also the bridge.
Huh. Yeah.
They were built.
Was the Bullet's intent? Would you say that's a precursor to what Squire became for Fender?
Well, Squires came out in 1983 and 4, right in there when Fender reorganized, was bought out by the employees. And the Stratocasters emulated, they were exact duplicates of a 73 Stratocaster.
Yeah.
With everything that it had, those were very sought after guitars today because they were so good. And the Squires they were meant to be the bottom of the line,
right?
But they were $349, I think, when they first came out, and then within a couple of years, they dropped in price to around $200. And at one point, Guitar Center was selling some really, really cheesy Squires that Fender made for them. It was Guitar Center exclusive. They were really cheesy, and they were selling them for $99. But for $99, you got a $99 guitar.
That's right.
Nowadays, Squires have the quality's way up on them because American Fenders are, it's hard to spend a couple $1,000 on a guitar if you're a working musician. And a lot of them play Squires because they're super good, and their best ones are only around $500.
Right.
So they're affordable, and the quality's there, the look is there, the feel is there.
Right.
So that Squire, it developed over a period of time. At first, it was going to be a very, very bottom of the line thing, and then it went to one of Fender's best selling groups of guitars.
Yeah. Well, it definitely was affordable, and I really do believe this, in my opinion, that when you have a bolt-on neck design like Leo came up with the Stratocaster, and as the evolution of that particular model, then becoming the Squire line, using the same design but manufactured with lower grade wood, a little bit more affordable electronics, and so forth. Unless you are absolute master level players, that was just going to be just fine. And what I found is that you can have a part caster of picking out what you want, putting it together, and have that perform equally, if not surpass, a top of the line Corona USA. And I think when top shelf guitar players start to recognize that, then all of a sudden it became a really hard thing for Fender to justify. Oh, this is one of standards that came out of California for $2,400, when you can get a $900 guitar perform or outperform that guitar. Where in Gibsons, and this is again my opinion because I've played enough of it, that a $5,000 Gibson will outplay a $2,000 Gibson hands down, because where it's made and how many is made and what kind of care went into it. You want to share a little insights about that thought?
Just, Gibson's a totally different marketing strategy than Fender. Fender was assembly line. Gibson has always been a more precise hand-built guitar. And when you start spending mega thousands of dollars, you really get a Rolls Royce of a guitar.
Right.
For years I collected Les Pauls, especially flame tops.
Yeah.
And some of them were, just unbelievable guitars. And it's true with any line of Gibson guitars, whether it's Les Pauls, SGs, hollow bodies, basses, whatever. They're really high end stuff. When you pick it up, you just go, wow, this is everything I thought it would be.
Right. Yeah, there's a level of awesomeness to, I think, a well-made instrument, and this goes across the board, I think, to all the other type of instruments as well, not just in guitar. When you handle a really nice handmade bass, you can feel the difference. When you play a real nice handmade piano, you can hear and play and feel the difference. That's where I start to look at, okay, where is the quality difference between a custom shop versus a production line versus someone that is custom built like yourself, who would do part casters and put together stuff and build a quality instrument. All in all, if you're a good guitar player, you're going to benefit from all three designs. But the key thing is which one's going to shine out of your personality. It's going to give you the most for you as the guitar player. So Dan, as you, the guitar guru, the guitar shop owner, when a great talent comes in and goes, I need something, how do you assess to bring them the best instrument to them to try?
Well, you got to get to know them a little bit, because somebody walks in your store, you don't know their style. You don't know, what they want. And many times they don't know what they want either.
Yeah.
But, you got to get to know them and find out, how do they play, and watch them play a little bit and whatnot, and then make recommendations based on, my experience, and I'm not always right, for sure,
Right.
Sometimes you got to make several recommendations in a row before you finally get to that sweet spot where they go, yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Sure.
But you mentioned something earlier. I'll hurry up, about setting up guitars, and it's not using measuring devices. I think a lot of people depend on that. I've had people ask me to do that, and I go, no, I'm not interested in doing that at all. Let me set your guitar up. If you like it, fine. If you don't pay it for it. And they've always paid.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of it, because you and I hung out quite a bit before I left to Los Angeles, which I left around age 23. I just turned 23. So between age 21 and 23, you and I had a lot of time in the shop talking and whatnot. And I think I picked up a lot of your idealisms to organicness, because I do set up guitar with only the intention of what can I get the most out of this guitar. And I'll give you an example with this. A friend of mine gave me 80s Charvel to set up. In this 80s Charvel, it's no it's no slouch by any stretch. This is out of San Dimas. It's one of those guitars that they take meticulous care to put on the top of the line, hardware back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing was almost near mint, but yet it played like a dog, and he just didn't know. So tweaking the bar a little bit, pulling the neck back a little bit, and just slowly let it simmer and set, because I knew that they didn't use cheap crap on it. So therefore, it wasn't going to constantly misbehave, as I would describe putting together, let's say, one of those Asian guitars. Asian guitar, you can set something up, half an hour, come back, and it'd be kind of, not the same again. And you keep on playing with it. And is it because of the wood? Yeah, it's a lot of it. I always attribute to the wetness of the wood, too much moisture in the wood.
And basswood bodies are notorious for that.
Yeah. And that's the thing where, if you're just buying wood by the bulk and you're slapping these things together, it's a crapshoot. I've always told people who wants to know about guitars, of which I get, I said, you got to understand, the ones that's affordable, you may get 1 out of 100 that's going to be a decent, solid instrument you can depend on, that you keep for years. Where out of good guitars, midline, we're talking about $1,000 to $2,000, probably 1 out of 10 is going to be the go-to creme de la creme for your life. But when you're talking about top shelf, Bernie Rico, Noser, Gibson custom shops, Fender custom, the guys that really put some thoughts into their guitars and take their time, probably 1 out of 2 is going to be phenomenal. And the other one's going to be just great, Yeah. I've never seen anything at that level come out being a dog. Have you?
No.
Yeah.
No, they go through too many sets of hands. Their quality control is superb. And that's part of what you pay for. When you spend that much money, you're paying for quality control, and it's worth every nickel.
Yeah, I agree. As a matter of fact, I have a custom shop Gibson Hummingbird out of the, what is it? The state there, Omaha? Is that what their custom shop is for the acoustic guitars?
I think it's in Montana.
Montana, that's it, exactly. Montana. So this sucker is full of inlays, right? It's not just the bird on the pick guard. It's birds all over the headstock and in the neck and so forth. So they had to take some time, not screw this up. This is something that they had to choose the good wood, because the retail of that sucker was $7,800. And for me to drop $7,800 on an acoustic guitar, which I'm an electric player by stretch, 90%. My acoustic playing is just me farting around the house, but I couldn't pass it, because I had such great experience playing the custom shop Gibsons that when I had the means to be able to get one, that I was going to find one that was going to be unique and it was going to be great. So the reason why I'm going down this road, this guitar has been in my collection now going on 4 years. And I'll tell you what, never changed the strings on it yet. But that guitar has mellowed and seasoned slowly but surely. And this guitar sounded sweeter today than it did when I took it off the shelf. And there's no way to describe it other than it's because it was cared for. It was used with the best material. And then there's the X factor that I always said to people. When you have the spirit of the human who is passionately with heart building a music instrument, that energy is infused into that instrument. And that instrument is now actually taking life. Sure, it takes you to spark the life to get the music out of it. But I firmly believe this. Once is the guitar or the piano or whatever it may be handmade, and it becomes existence as a reality of the instrument, that instrument's alive. That instrument has the energy that the builders put in. And that's what makes certain group of instrument extremely desirable, extremely magical. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. It's that way. You nailed it. I don't have any additional comments on that.
Well, it's interesting that I had a podcast talking with another gentleman, and I said that about the Steinway piano, and he says, well, the piano doesn't really have anything going on unless you put it. So it's just an inanimate object that sits there and it's nothing. And I don't
Well,
believe that. I don't believe that whatsoever.
I don't think he knew what he was talking about. I don't want to put him down or anything, but I mean, because I know so much about guitars, I also know so much about about other things.
Yeah.
I recognize the quality and craftsmanship and brilliance of a Steinway piano. I had the good fortune recently to go jam with some guys, and the guy had a Steinway grand piano in his room that I got to mess with.
Right.
And it was, it might as well been made of solid gold. It was that cool.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If I was in a guitar shop and there's 40 Gibsons, top shelf Gibsons, of course, then it becomes such a Candyland store because you're around greatness. Then you can start to really notice the nuances of the little things of that top greatness of the music instrument on that level. I had the opportunity to have that with Steinway. The Steinway dealership that I ended up starting my piano career with had easily on the floor between 30 to 40 Steinways at a time. We're talking about as old as the rebuilds from 1870s to the brand new one that came out of the New York showroom floor last year, those type of variants, right? And when you have enough of the same quality top shelf stuff, then you can start to spend time to learn the personalities. And this is the part that I loved about, when we always talk about guitars, is that you recognize that level of the craftsmanship, the intention of what that instrument now can do with the player. And then you then can fine tune it for the player itself. I believe that's the refinement aspect of your guitar guru knowledge, right? And at this point where the guitar is moving away from pop music, and we notice guitar is taking almost a back seat to it. How do we keep this guitar business and the guitar instrument alive in our society?
That's a good question, Jeff. We've definitely noticed, with all this internet and everything, that people are trying to get away from it somewhat. And I guess, the answer is to keep doing what you're doing and for me to keep doing what I'm doing and, try to, keep people interested as much as we can. I mean, I have a lot of guys like yourself that I've known for most of your life. And, they're kind of, I'd learn something and they would learn it for me or whatever, and so they're kind of kind of disciples to it, sort of, and they're going out and doing their thing like you're doing your thing and spreading the word, about the joys of owning guitars and playing them and whatnot. And that's what we need to do. All these kids nowadays are wanting to, do everything online, record, play instruments. People play instruments online. And it's like, that's ridiculous. You're not doing anything, and
right.
If you put your hands on it and you make tone come out of it and that tone becomes a song, then you're playing something. If you're pushing buttons, you're not doing nothing. You might as well be masturbating.
Well, and that's the sad part, that musicality has changed the way that technology took over, opposed to organicness of us refining and practicing countless hours to master an instrument, but in a relationship to that instrument. I've never heard anybody who goes, "Oh man, that rhythm box is my go-to that I could never do without." Other than just because it's technology, I can give you another rhythm box and you're just fine. But if I took your Stratocaster away, or I took your Les Paul away and gave you another one, you'll sit there and think twice about, I'm not sure if I could just go on and do the same thing with that guitar.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a big thing. Well, we're going over an hour. I want to let everybody know Dan is here in Cleveland, Texas. Where is Cleveland, Texas, sir?
Cleveland, Texas is approximately 50 miles north of Houston off of Highway 59.
Yeah. And you have a shop that we can all come in and look at your vintage guitars and stuff?
Absolutely. From beginners to pros, and, we kind of do it all. It's a little shop. but it's got a real cool vibe to it. It's like a guitar shop from the 80s, you know.
Absolutely.
You can see guitars.
And let me ask you this: are you for hire to sort out vintage guitars still?
Say that again.
Are you a gun for hire to go search out vintage guitars?
No, not really. At my age, I don't want to do that anymore. I mean, I still like to beat the bushes myself, but I don't want to do it for somebody else.
Right. Okay. And what other services can you offer? Let's say if I'm in New York.
Well, yeah. See, that's where I used to do a lot of mail order repairs, but I quit doing that too because shipping's become quite a problem.
Right.
You know, I mean, if you live in New York and you just got a question, you can sure call me. I'll talk to you as long as it takes to answer it. If I have an answer for you, I don't know everything, that's for sure. Right. You might teach me something.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you're accessible. People can talk with you, pick your brain a little bit, get a little assistance.
Absolutely.
That's great. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put your contact info under the description. This is, of course, currently live streaming on Facebook as well as LinkedIn and YouTube and X. But on Sunday, we're going to have this on redpills.tv, which is Red Pills Media, Red Pills Project, decentralized media. And this has a huge audience. It's a global audience. And I'm so glad you're able to come on this podcast with us, Dan, because like I said, I've been friends with you for a long time, but I admire your passion so much in regards to how you have dedicated your career in vintage, in electric guitars, in just construction, repairs, the knowledge. You're one of the components that keeps this fire burning. And I thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I've enjoyed myself this afternoon. And, I'm a big admirer of yours, too. You just seem to do all this great stuff. And, and I enjoy sitting back and watching you.
Yeah, well, I think you and I are cutting the same cloth, brother, that we like to do what we like, the stuff we love. And then we do it with our heart. We do it with passion. And then we do it with 100% dedication to it. So I would definitely like for you to ever come back whenever you like. Just let me know. We'll do a specific topic because we barely scratched the surface. I know there's still so much things that I'm itching to talk with you about, whether it's be Gibsons, whether it's be Fenders. There's a whole era of the 80s coming out of California we could talk about. Of course, definitely the Gritch family, the Gritch desirables on the rockabilly sounds and how they affected, as well as what about these one-off builders that come up with these crazy type of guitars, like Rick Turner with his guitar, those type of things. Yeah. So I thank you so much, Dan. So stay put.
Thank you,
everybody else. Thank you so much for tuning in the 13th Note podcast, Art of Mastery. And don't forget to like and subscribe and join us again next time. Like I said, this will stream live on Sunday again. And with that, thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Jeff.
Talk with you right after this. And everybody else, have a great day. And I'll see you on the 13th Note podcast.